How about now? All right. A little false start there, but we're good to go. So normally at this point, Riley is reading a disclaimer, and the disclaimer says something along the lines of the opinions in this show do not reflect the opinions of the Grand Lodge, but I guess maybe in this case they do, since we have the Grand Master with us. Grand Master, we're so happy to have you here. I emailed the Grand Master the other day, and we talked a time or two about doing a show here at the end of the year, and it was theoretical until here pretty recently. We started getting serious about it. And how many days you got before you're done?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. So 3 weeks before the end of the year, we're going to kind of do a recap. And we've managed to get him down here to the tractor shed one more time. We're going to try and get him home before 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And we really appreciate you coming, and we appreciate everything you've done for Masonry this year.
My privilege.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to start off with a story. So, last year, not long before you were installed, you did a program somewhere. I think maybe this program was at Veritas, but it may have been at the Children's Home. Somewhere I was at, that you did a program and you talked about Amos and the plumb line. Do you remember this?
Veritas Lodge.
Yep. So what the Grandmaster was talking about was that the plumb line represents the plumb of morality. And he emailed me a day or two later and wanted to know what I thought of his program. And I told him I thought it was very good and I really enjoyed it. I would have taken a more spiritual approach in that perpendiculars always represent the spiritual aspect, which is, close to morality, but I would have taken a different approach. And immediately, synchronicity started hitting me at every turn about the relationship between morality and spirituality and how they were intimately tied together. It was the universe telling me that I should know exactly what I'm talking about before I jump out and start talking about it. So I talked to Chuck Dunning when I went to Guthrie, and Chuck's a Guthrie Scottish Rite guy, and he's coming to do a program for us, and pretty soon at Sophia. Anyway, I asked him about this, and he's a really smart Kabbalistic kind of guy, and he said, "Well, Ben, the tablets of the law reflect the universal law." Which just means that that our basis of morality has directly come down from God in spirituality. Okay. It's probably a little deeper than we planned on getting into tonight, right. But I just wanted to tell you how deep the Grandmaster is when it comes to stuff of this nature. So you normally see the Grandmaster Webster that is lawyerly and is in his administrative capacity, but I know the Bryant Webster that goes much deeper than that, and I don't know how many people know how lucky we are to have a Grandmaster that's that smart and in tune with those sort of things.
I don't know about smart. Even a blind hog will find an acorn every now and then.
We'll call you philosophical. How about that?
There you go. Searching.
That's right. So I plan to do. I announced earlier that sometime towards the end of the year I was going to do the I Love Bryant Webster podcast, but I didn't really think you were going to be here for it. And really not just kissing your behind there, Grandmaster. I want you to know how much you've meant to me and how much I've learned from you, and what a great Grandmaster I think you've been. Okay, enough of that, because I know he doesn't want to. He's very modest. He doesn't want to hear that, but it's true. We're very lucky. Let's talk about the stuff. Let's talk about some cooler stuff. Tell me about the canned food drive.
Canned food drive, Mason's Can, absolute success thanks to all the brothers in North Carolina. We announced at Grand Lodge that at that time we'd raised about $3,200. It turned out to be much more than that. We raised over $6,200 plus 7,000 pounds of actual food, feeding over 50,000 meals in a one-day effort. It's amazing. And just a huge thanks to all the brothers that participated in that. A lot of lodges, a lot of districts caught fire with that, decided to do it as a group, went out and got discounts on how to buy the food, brought it in truckloads. So it was just a huge success, enough so that The folks behind me in the Grand Line have decided they're going to continue that, and that'll be an annual thing that we do at Annual Communication. It is such an easy project to reach out and feed our neighbors. It's something wonderful to do, and it's easy to do while we're at Grand Lodge. We already do our business. We already do our fellowship. We can feed a lot of people along the way. So it's just a great thing. We'll keep that up. I'm really tickled with that. Our brothers really showed out on that.
Good. Well, that's great news. Great news. Let's talk about some of the projects that you had going on this year other than that. You're a lawyer by trade, and estate planning and writing a will and all that was a big focus for you this year. Just tell us about what kind of response you got.
So one of the things that we did at every district meeting is we talked about estate planning. We talked about the importance of a will, the option of a trust, the importance of doing a durable general power of attorney while you're living, the importance of doing a healthcare power of attorney while you're living. We did that program at every district meeting. We saw over 2,000 Masons in the course of that. We also talked about it every other opportunity we had to speak. So well more than 3,000 people heard that pitch. I know people have responded to it because I've done a few wills for Masons out of that. I've had others tell me that it prompted them to go get their affairs in order. It's so important for your family to do that, to build a strong foundation for your family so that things are not in total disarray when you pass, because we're all going to pass. That is not optional. We don't get off the planet alive. We all leave here voluntarily or involuntarily. We all go. And so it's important to do that. And the more important part for us as Masons and the more important part for our charities is we have all these high-minded words about charity extends beyond the grave. Well, only if you have a will. Because if you don't have a will, the rules that the state prescribes for your estate doesn't leave any money to charity. Usually nieces and nephews and foreign people that you don't like end up with your money, and it's too late for you to do anything about it at that point, and no charity gets any of it. So it is the only way to provide for charity is to have a will and leave something to the charities in your will. So that was part of the sideline of that, but the most important part was just trying to give a gift to our brothers to take care of them and their families. And if we help our charities as a byproduct of that, wonderful. But that wasn't the chief aim.
But we do have some pretty good charities that would love to.
We have wonderful
that could
charities
be benefited by
that would love to talk to them, and we have a more organized way to do that now that is coming forward. We this year stepped out and hired a chief development officer. His name is Jeff Hensley. He's been on board about 3 months now. Jeff is going to organize all the fundraising efforts for both the Masonic Home for Children at Oxford and Whitestone and Masonic and Eastern Star Community, and for the North Carolina Masonic Foundation. The North Carolina Masonic Foundation is funding the whole program. It results in no reduction in allocations to the two charities. They're funding the whole thing. The goal is that they will raise so much more money, both from the public and from Masons, that it will more than fund itself and start driving enormous amounts of money back to our charities, with the hope being that our charities become sustainable. Our membership is shrinking. We recognize that, and so we have to come up with some other sources to make sure we deal with that. So that program is very robust. Also, we are going to have an Eastern and a Western regional director. Some of those folks may be very familiar faces to people. So it's really important to move forward with that, to support that as that news comes out, as we're able to release that news. At this point, it's Jeff Hensley is the face of that and is developing that program and working on putting his staff together. So really excited about that. And it's a way that people, if they have interest in doing a will, they can talk to Jeff Hensley and he can give them some guidance that helps them help our charities.
Very good. And as soon as this structure all gets in place, I'm sure that these guys will come out to your lodge and do a program for you on a lodge night.
Absolutely.
And, we can put somebody in your lodge to explain how to go about all this and just what we've got going on. These are big changes.
Big changes. And it'll be in the North Carolina Mason. It'll be on the website. You'll see changes to websites. You'll see much more robust communication throughout the craft, because we don't do a good job of telling our story. And we're going to have to do a much better job of telling our story to do this.
I think you would be shocked. You might not, but I was shocked at how many people really don't understand what the foundation is and that we have 3 charities. Can you just tell them a little bit about that?
So the North Carolina Masonic Foundation has, until recently, been pretty much a silent partner. And they were out there, they received donations, they received estate gifts, they invested money very wisely, and they've always been at the ready to protect our other charities. When Whitestone was having problems, they stepped up and put a fund in place to make sure they met the insurance reserve requirement. When we needed credit facilities, they provided a loan. When we needed to do credit facilities at Masonic Home for Children at Oxford to build the new cottages, they provided that. So they've always been there helping out in the background, but there was not much publicity about them. They didn't do much fundraising. You'd hear a lot about them from time to time in connection with the Charles Cathy Scholarship Program, because they administer that, and we'd raise money for that. Doug Caudle last year did a fundraiser for the Charles Cathy Scholarship Program, which is through the North Carolina Masonic Foundation. But it is a fund that is out there that's invested, and then all the investment results go to the 2 charities. But we have to be really careful and say, while there is money there, while it's invested, it's not enough to cover the needs of the charities. And we still have to do direct fundraising for the charities. We still need to grow the foundation, because what we think is a lot of money is not a lot of money when it comes to running 2 charities that have budgets in the millions of dollars. Whitestone's budget now is almost $15 million a year. You run a deficit of $1 million a year for a while, and you start putting a real strain on the resources that we have. So we have to run those charities well, and we have to continue to grow our foundation so that someday, maybe, we have them endowed at a point that they don't have to do as much fundraising. They'll always have to do fundraising, but they'll at least have a security blanket, which they don't have now.
Tell you something else people don't understand is I hear this all the time about Whitestone. They don't understand that you can give money does the money that you give to Whitestone go to charity, to help Masons and Eastern Stars specifically, or does it just go into Whitestone?
Okay.
I hear it all the time.
Great question. There's 2 ways to give money to Whitestone. And when you see their new annual report that they've created, if you gave in either way, you get credit for it. The best way to give, which is the newest way to give to that, is to write your check to the NC Mesh, M-E-S-H, Foundation LLC. And what that does, that pot of money is then used to scholarship residents to Whitestone. And so it goes directly to Eastern Star members and to Masons who need to go to the home or are already in the home and can't pay their bill. It's to keep them there regardless of their ability to pay.
Every penny of it.
Every penny. It is also going to be used going forward to create an outreach program. So if a Eastern Star or a Mason wants to stay in their community but has a gap between what they get in Social Security and what their monthly bills are, but they'd be happier at home than moving to Greensboro, we can send them a check of $300 a month to meet the gap between Social Security and their bills, and they can stay where their family is, where their friends are, where their church is, and it's much cheaper. We can help a lot more people. It costs about $6,000 a month to keep somebody at Whitestone. For $6,000 at $300 a month, we could help a lot of people. So that's really, and the goal is that you spread it across the state. So now if you've got somebody in Robbinsville that needs help, we can help them in Robbinsville even though they wouldn't be interested in moving to Greensboro. And so it really kind of helps our Masons and Eastern Stars in Robbinsville who'd like to raise money for Whitestone say, they're helping somebody right here in our community. And that's the goal, is to make Whitestone statewide in its scope and outreach instead of just Greensboro or having to move there from some other place in the state. The other way to give is to give direct to Whitestone. A lot of people still do that. That money still goes to charitable care. Whitestone has a budget of about $1.2 million, $1.5 million a year that we do in charity work. We have to do that kind of charity. Much of that comes from the LLC across, but some of it comes direct to Whitestone and gets used that way. It's less easy to track if you send it straight to Whitestone. You still get a charitable receipt back, but it goes in the general fund and we provide that charitable care.
And the Mesh Foundation LLC is different from the North Carolina Masonic Foundation.
Yes.
There's confusion sometimes.
Okay, and that's a great question. So the North Carolina Masonic Foundation has been around a long time. 1912, it was chartered with the Secretary of State. It is a 501c3, meaning you can write a check to the North Carolina Masonic Foundation and take that off your taxes. Whereas if you write a check to your lodge to pay for a refrigerator at the lodge, you cannot take that off your taxes.
Right.
So the North Carolina Masonic Foundation formed what is called a single-member LLC that is called NC Mesh Foundation LLC. It gets the same tax status, 501c3 tax status, as the foundation has. But it avoids all the expense of setting that up. It avoids all the additional IRS regulation of setting that up. They just get it automatically because they're controlled by the North Carolina Masonic Foundation, and yet it's a separate entity. All the money's kept separate. It has a separate board of 5 managers who are a combination of Eastern Stars and Masons who manage that, and they do the scholarship decisions. They do the application review. They do the investing of the money. It's a really brilliant way to do it that has saved us a lot of money and been just wildly successful beyond what we ever thought might happen with it.
Very good. What is the Senior Protection Program?
Okay, Senior Protection Program is something that has not taken off like I had hoped it would. It's still a nascent idea that we've got to continue to encourage people about. One of the things that we wrote about during the year in the North Carolina Mason is the fact that there are predators out there who will take advantage of our seniors. And they are sometimes roofing guys, they're sometimes plumbers, they're sometimes telephone scammers, they're sometimes lawyers, they're sometimes business people who they're really not legitimate at whatever they do. Their game is they go to a senior and talk them into fear or whatever to pay them money to do some alleged service which is not the quality it should be or is just a straight up scam, and they take their money and they disadvantage seniors. And usually the game is they'll pick at them and get a little bit of money from them, and if they succeed, then they'll continue to pick at it until it's more and more money. So my thought is one of the things that we do really well as Masons is we look after each other, or it's one of the things we promise that we will do really well. And so the goal is that Masons will make sure that the secretary of their lodge knows that they're an HVAC guy or they're a lawyer. And so that'll be put into Maury. So if widow of Brother John needs an HVAC guy, she can call the lodge secretary and say, my air conditioner's gone out, what do I do? And he can say, well, I can't do that myself, but I know this really great guy, Ben Wallace, who's a good HVAC guy, call him. And so now she knows Ben's a Mason. Ben does HVAC. She may or may not choose to hire Ben, but at least she'll know that Ben is a legitimate, ethical businessman in his community that provides the service she needs, and Ben may choose to work for her and get paid. Ben may choose to help her some other way. Ben may say, I don't work in your area, or your problem is not one that I specialize in, but here's 2 or 3 reputable people that you can call who will provide this service instead of the guy who came by your house and knocked on your door out of the blue and said, I see smoke coming out of your condenser unit. Why don't you let me look at it?
So why didn't it take off like you wanted?
I think the problem is it's just time intensive. Everybody's busy. Lodge secretaries don't get that information in. Members don't give that information. It's hard to keep updated. We just have to continue to spread that word and encourage people to do that. I would love us to be at some point where we would have a group of folks, lawyers, accountants, social workers, etc., who, when we find out that a brother or a widow is in trouble, we can go in and help that person. Because oftentimes the family can't help because the elderly person is afraid to tell their family, because if they tell their family, they'll think they're slipping. Mm-hmm. And they might put them in a home, and they don't want to lose their independence, so they keep getting deeper and deeper in with the scammer. Mm-hmm. If they knew they could reach out to a lodge secretary, to a lodge master, to somebody in the lodge that was a brother to their husband or whomever, that person could take it in confidence. I mean, we pledge that we'll do that. We'll keep the secrets of a worthy brother, Master Mason, and they could help them out, put them back on the right road. Their family may never be the wiser, or they may choose to help them tell their family so they can get even more robust help.
I love this idea. So, how are you going to keep pushing it when you're the immediate past grandmaster?
I think we just continue to encourage lodge secretaries to get the information in. The fields are in Maury. It's easy to do.
The secretaries can do it.
Secretaries can put it in. And so there's a space for occupation. The big problem we run into is many of our members are retired. And so when asked their occupation, they say, retired. Well, it would be really helpful to know from what?
Right.
Were you a school teacher? Yeah. Were you an HVAC guy? Do you still have your license as a plumber? Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah. Good. I like it. All right, we're going to push that. Write that down, Brown. We're going to keep pushing that.
We've got to be more helpful to our members. It will increase the value of our membership, which will provide more value to the experience. I mean, if I know, I mean, we're not supposed to have mercenary motives, and that's not mercenary. If we look after each other, that increases the value of our membership, and it'll grow.
Oh, absolutely agree. I mean, so, the really robust lodges that are doing stuff, they're doing a lot of stuff locally.
Absolutely.
And they look after their own people a ton.
I get calls all the time from my brothers in Asheville who know I'm a lawyer. And it may or may not be something that I do. But if it's not something I do, I say, call Joe Smith. He's a lawyer who does what you need. He's a reputable guy. He's not a Mason, but he'll take good care of you as he should.
Right. And if you really believe in the tenets of Masonry, then you want to help people.
Absolutely.
Not just sell them things, but I mean, you want to be able to give them advice or and help them in any way that you can, whether that's taking somebody's trash out or helping them with something like what we're talking about here.
Here's a perfect example. Past Grandmaster Gene Jernigan makes mattresses for a living. He has a mattress factory. He lives a long way from where I live, but he knows a lot about mattresses. I needed a mattress. Needed to go buy a new mattress. Didn't know the first thing about how to get a good mattress, so I call him because I knew he's a mattress guy. And an hour and a half later, I know an awful lot about mattresses and how to buy a mattress and what terms to use and not use and what the vocabulary means and how to know when I'm not being told exactly the truth. And so my wife and I go locally and buy a mattress very successfully. He gave me his time to do that as a brother. There was nothing in it for him business-wise. Neither of us was looking to make a business transaction. I was looking for education because it made no sense for me to go all the way to Dunn to get a mattress to take to Asheville. Mm-hmm. But I could get the knowledge over the phone and go be very successful. He was happy to help. I was happy to get the information. And I do the same thing with law stuff. People will call me and say, I need to do an estate, but I'm in Dare County. Well, it's not practical for me to go to Dare County to help them, but I can teach them the vocabulary and I can explain to them how to avoid getting taken in case they run into somebody who might otherwise take them, and they can go do their own thing in their own community. It benefits the people providing the service in their community. They become a more informed consumer. Everybody's better off. It's not cost me anything. It's not cost them anything more. They're just better informed. We've shed a little light. Crazy.
I love it. We're gonna help push this, Brown, because this is a great idea. All right, let's talk about the lodge assessment tool a little bit.
Okay.
It's on our website. It's on the Masonic Education website. Somehow you did it and we got credit for it.
It's great.
We're going to teach that at Wilkerson College this year. We're going to have a block for that. We're probably going to work it into Davie somehow. At least those are smaller snippets, smaller education blocks of teaching blocks, but we'll get that worked in there. The lodge assessment tool is a really good deal. Tell us about it.
So the lodge assessment tool, the idea is if you don't know where you are and you don't know where you want to go, you're probably not going to get there. And a lodge is a big organism. It has a lot of moving parts. And if we don't stop and take a look in the mirror of the lodge to see what it is and what it's doing, what it does well, what it could improve on, we don't know what to do. We just kind of do what we do. We show up and we read the minutes, and we go through the Bonson manual, and we read the minutes, and we go home because we have no idea how to change anything or that anything needs to be changed because we just don't know. So the idea behind the Lodge Assessment Tool was, let's create a checklist of all the different systems and functions in a lodge, whether it be ritual work or how you handle your finances or what your building looks like or what your meals look like or how your meetings go or your educational program. And the master and the wardens or other members sit down and kind of have a conversation with this thing in front of them and say, well, how good is our ritual? Are we a 1 or are we a 5? Well, we think our ritual's great. We've got 7 certified lecturers in our lodge. We do letter perfect work all the time. We'll check that one off. Give you the highest mark on that one. Well, how are we doing on our finances? Well, we've got $20,000 in the bank. All our bills are paid. We have an investment with the North Carolina Masonic Foundation. We have a robust checking account. Our dues are higher than most. Everything's going great. Okay, give yourself a check mark on that. Well, how's your building look? Well, there's grass growing up through the sidewalk. And we got 3 broken windows. And our parking lot is a mess and full of trash. And nobody mows the grass. Well, let's circle that one. And maybe we focus on that this year. Let's come up with a plan for how do we get the weeds out of the sidewalk? How do we get the broken windows fixed? How do we do those things? So it's a 4-page worksheet. And so among that, you're going to have some things that you do really well. Great. Good for you. Celebrate that. There's going to be some things that are little bitty things like spraying a little Roundup in the sidewalk cracks that you can do next Saturday. And then there's going to be some big things like our lodge can't even open the lodge properly. We need to know how to open a Master Mason's lodge. Well, you may need to get a certified lecturer to come help your lodge do that. But the idea is you go through everything comprehensively, and then you go back through it. And you say, these are the top 5 things that we care the most about for next year. And we're going to focus on those 5 things, and here's our plan for fixing them. And my suggestion is you pick some low-hanging fruit, some things that are easy, spray the Roundup next Saturday. And then you pick some hard things like, we need an elevator to get our members from the lower floor to the upper floor. Well, that's a big project. You're going to have to fundraise. You're going to have to find an engineer. You're going to have to find somebody that can install that for you. And you're going to have to find the money to pay for it. That's a much bigger thing, but you should have some big things on your list, and you should have some little things on your list, and you should work on them, and then when you accomplish them, you should celebrate. And then you go back through this assessment again. What are we doing great? What do we need to improve on? Make a new list of things to do, and keep reevaluating that list constantly. And when you look back over 5 years, you'll go, golly, gee whiz. We were pretty good 5 years ago, but look at where we are now. And let's make another list. And so it's a tool. Nobody at the Grand Lodge looks at it. Nobody wants it. It is a tool for the lodge. And the idea is that you do it at the beginning of your year, you do it at the end of your year, and you just do a continual rolling cycle of self-improvement for your lodge.
Are a lot of people using it?
Anecdotally, I hear that some lodges are using it. The DDGMs have it. They use it as a tool when they have lodges that are struggling. I have no way of knowing because I've very deliberately not tried to monitor who uses it and who doesn't, because I don't want anybody to think that, oh, this is really a test. And eventually the Grand Lodge is going to take all this data and criticize us if we're not at a certain level in the assessment, because that's never the intention. It is strictly for the lodge to use for their own purposes. They can do it and shred it, and never tell anybody what was on it except to work on their action plan.
That's the way to start this lodge rescue thing, is to go in and just help them run their checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Just help them talk through what most lodges are doing. Well, we don't know if we're doing good or bad. Well, here's where most lodges are.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
Look in the mirror.
Man. Yep. All right, very good. We ought to run a little seminar on that somehow. I'll work on that. Tell us about running the Marine Corps Marathon.
So just a fun thing for me. We were able to turn it into a little bit of a fundraiser. We raised about $3,700 for the North Carolina Masonic Foundation with a GoFundMe page. Jeff Hensley, our new development director, set up the GoFundMe page. I just had to put it on Facebook and advertise about it. Marine Corps Marathon has been going on 41 years now. Our grand lecturer, John Birchfield, has run it 13 times.
Wow.
So about a year ago, he said, you should go run this next year with me. I said, sure. So he knew all the logistics. We were able to get hotel reservations within walking distance of the start and finish line, and we were able to get plane reservations at the right time, and he knew kind of how to do it in a way that worked very sensibly, so it made it easy for me to just tag along and be able to know how to navigate all the logistics of this thing, because the Marine Corps Marathon's a big race. About 25,000 people run the 26.2 miles, and another 5,000 to 8,000 people run a 10K the same day. So there's a lot of logistics to it, and a lot of navigating crowds and knowing what to do and what not to do to make sure that you can get to the starting line on time and have a place to stay and get food to eat and those kinds of things. But it was delightful, beautiful day, very moving. You come down through Arlington Cemetery to the start line, it's dark, and the sun hadn't come up yet, and you crest a little hill, and all you see in front of you is the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial and the first pink of sunrise. And if you're an American, it's a heart-stopping moment. I had to stop and tear up for a few minutes and say, I'm ready. Turn me loose.
Gives me chills just listening to it. Yeah, I love D.C.
It's a beautiful city. This course takes full advantage of the city. You run through Roslyn, you run through Arlington, you run across the Key Bridge into Georgetown, you run through Georgetown, you go out the Rock Creek Parkway, you end up going out along Haynes Point, and they have 1 mile of the marathon where for the first part of the mile, you continually pass these signs with the pictures of Marines who have lost their lives serving our country in the last year. And if that's not enough to do you in, once you get past all the signs, all their families are standing there holding large American flags and cheering for you as you go by. If you can get past that and not be in tears, there's something wrong with you. But you go down the mall, you circle right in front of the U.S. Capitol, and go back down the mall on the other side. You end up going across this horrible interstate bridge, which is quite a test at 18 miles to kind of just grit it out across this 2-mile stretch of interstate bridge. And then you get to the Pentagon, you run around the parking lot of the Pentagon, you head into Crystal City, and then you finish at the Iwo Jima Memorial in Arlington National Cemetery. And you just cannot be anything less than inspired by this. And oh, by the way, you're running 26.2 miles at the same time. So you laugh, you cry, you hurt, you stretch, people puke. It's quite a physical test, but it's a very wonderful opportunity. It's the 7th marathon that I've run. It's the best experience I've ever had. It was just magnificent. And the signs, I laughed at the signs. People hold up signs that say all kinds of funny things. You run better than the government. Hydration is sexy. Stop reading the signs. This is a race. Just all kinds of things that kind of charge you batteries. People have signs that say touch here for power boost, and just all kinds of really amusing things that help you play the mental game of running a marathon, because a marathon is 50% physical and 75% mental. So,
well, I'm awful proud of you, and I can't run from here to the truck, but it sounds wonderful.
It's fun. It is the way that I have survived the stress of this year, is to get out and run for an hour a day. It's the 1 hour that my phone's not buzzing, the email's not pinging, nobody's reaching out to have a little piece of me, and I can refocus and charge my batteries, and it's good for me health-wise. And I run in the woods a lot. We have a lot of trails around Asheville. We have a lot of trails in Durham where my parents are, and so I've been able to get out and really enjoy that during the year.
I want to talk about Rick Carter a little bit. Rick, I said in the last podcast that did you listen to it?
Yes.
I said I didn't like Rick very much when I first met him, but I came to find out that the things that I admire most about him now were the things that I didn't like to begin with. Sometimes you just got to give, change your perspective on stuff. Anyway, I'm really really sad to see him go. I mean, there's a season for everything, but he's meant a lot to Masonry, a lot. Tell us a little bit about Rick Carter.
So I've always had a very good relationship with Rick. Always been a big fan of Rick's, because Rick, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
There is no put on, there is no candy coating, there is no kid gloves at all with him. And I admire that in people. I'm kind of that way. I use longer words than he does, and I try to be more gentle than he does. But I appreciate the fact that he's not gentle.
Me too.
If you ask him a question, you better be ready for the answer.
Yeah.
And even if you don't ask a question, you better be ready for the answer, because he's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. And I admire that in people. I think that's so important for us as a fraternity, for any organization, to have those people who will tell you when the emperor has no clothes.
Yes.
We have to have that. We can't all say yes all the time. We need those folks. Rick has done a good job with the North Carolina Mason. He has steadfastly kept it as a fraternal publication. And that's important, and that's something we have to continue to do going forward. So it's a lot of change. This year has been a year of change, and Rick let me know in June that he was going to finalize his retirement. He'd kind of phased it in. He had stopped being assistant grand secretary several years ago, was just doing the North Carolina Mason. He said, it's time. I'm ready. And so we immediately started searching for how we were going to replace him and coming up with a plan for that. We've got a totally different situation from what we've had in a long time. It's going to be a joint position now between the North Carolina Masonic Foundation and the Grand Lodge of North Carolina. That person will do all the fundraising communication, but will also do the North Carolina Mason. So we're going to miss Rick. I think Rick will still be around. He's currently Secretary of the Lodge. He's a past master. I think he'll continue to be a loyal Mason that we'll see at Grand Lodge and other events statewide. He just won't be taking pictures as much directed to a purpose. He'll still be taking pictures for his own reasons and other things, but he is one of the most interesting Masons I've ever met, because at first glance, you really wouldn't understand how this guy's a Mason.
Right.
But he's just one of the best Masons I know, and has been so good for our Grand Lodge, has challenged our thinking, has made us look ourselves in the mirror and identify some things that we needed to do differently, and that's been good for us.
Who's going to do that now?
Well, we have a new editor of the North Carolina Mason.
I mean the prickly part.
Well, I don't know, because our new editor of the North Carolina Mason, at least by my initial exposure, is not prickly at all. Far from it. Who knows? I think people always rise to the occasion with what they need to do. And it's always important to have somebody that can be a truth speaker to you. We all need that person in our life. We have other Masons. There's one whom I love dearly, who I put on a committee this past year, even though he had caused great confusion on that committee in the past. And he asked me, he said, why'd you put me back on that committee? And I said, because you're our resident contrarian, and we need you to be our resident contrarian, because otherwise we go over the edge of the cliff together, all saying yes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not healthy.
Right. Well, safe travels to Rick. He's become one of my favorite Masons. And in the history, I can't wait to interview him.
Oh, it'll be a very interesting interview.
We have to do that one in a pub, in a different pub than this.
You may
real pub.
have to have a filter on that one.
Nah. We're gonna let him roll. Tell us about the person that's taking his place.
So as of this week, we have a new editor of the North Carolina Mason and a new communications director for the North Carolina Masonic Foundation. Her name is Beth Grace. Beth comes with incredible credentials. She's written for small newspapers. She worked for the Associated Press for a long time, about 12 years. She was the executive director of the North Carolina Press Association for a long time, and now she joins us in a full-time position doing communication for fundraising through the North Carolina Masonic Foundation, and editing the North Carolina Mason. And so people say, well, how can a lady be the editor of the North Carolina Mason? Well, the beautiful thing is that we have a board of publications who are all Masons, appointed by the Grand Master, one each year for 5-year terms. So there's 5 on that board. Their job is to control the content. So Masons will always control the content of the North Carolina Mason. We just happen to have a really talented writer who just happens to be a lady who will be the new editor. And she's already proven that she gets us. One of the tasks that she had to undertake to get the job was to write a story about Whitestone and giving at Whitestone. And without any prompting from anyone, she went to Whitestone. She interviewed Mark Collada. She interviewed resident Jean Llewellyn. She took a tour of the place. She understood all about us. She looked at our website. She talked to me on the phone. And she wrote an outstanding article that got right to the nub of why it's so important to give to Whitestone and how we have to go about working on the idea that we've got about 140 lodges in the state that give no money to Whitestone and why that shouldn't be the case, and really delivered something that is usable to us. And we think she's going to be just a home run. She was with us this weekend at our board meetings at Oxford and at Greensboro, and we're really looking forward to getting to know her better. And she'll be at Grand Lodge installation in December, and she'll start working. Rick Carter will do one more issue, that being the one that arises out of installation and so forth, and then first of the year she takes over and edits the North Carolina Mason.
Well, we're excited. I can't wait to meet her. I'm looking forward to good things coming from the North Carolina Mason.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. I guess that's all the mundane stuff we can talk about. Let's talk about all the fun stuff now. What's going on in Arkansas?
I have no idea what is going on in Arkansas. And I have to give the disclaimer that the Grand Master always gives when he talks about any other state. Every Grand Lodge is sovereign, and they have to make their own rules. They have to make their own decisions. They have to handle their own business, and it's their business. That being said, and I don't know a lot about the details of what's going on in Arkansas, the most recent thing is that the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma has suspended fraternal relations with Arkansas. And their reasons for doing that in large part is that Masons are no longer being allowed, even if they're in good standing, to get a certificate of good standing from the Grand Lodge of Arkansas to relocate their membership elsewhere. And that's a violation of the basic tenets of Freemasonry. That's at least the accusation that's being made by the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma, and that's why they've suspended fraternal relations. I suspect Arkansas may have a different view. Usually there's more than one view of what is going on in any given situation. We've also read reports that at least 2 officers of the Grand Lodge of Arkansas have been summarily removed from their offices. I don't know the details of exactly how that was done, whether that was Masonic charges or they were just removed. We just kind of see the reports, and you see their pictures disappear off the website, and we see reports in the internet world about it, and it's very difficult to confirm anything because there's no official reporting out of Arkansas about it at all.
Because there's an edict that they can't.
Exactly. So don't really know. Feel really sad for those folks. Their membership is plummeting. I don't think that telling people they can't leave your jurisdiction is very helpful. They should want to stay because you give them reasons to stay, not because you keep them from going if they want to go. So it's difficult. You know, they've had issues there for years with the Shrine. That's the only state in the United States that you do not have to be a Mason to be a Shriner. And that arises out of some difficulties between the Grand Lodge of Arkansas and the Shrine. It's all very sad. Hopefully they will get it figured out. It's their problem. They've got to figure out their problem. We're very blessed in North Carolina that we don't have those particular issues. We probably have issues just as bad of our own. I don't know that we have any issues that bad of our own.
Yeah.
But every jurisdiction has to handle their own business. I certainly don't think it's all that productive to suspend fraternal relations with another Grand Lodge to try and influence their behavior, because I I suspect they've made a behavior decision for reasons that they know and things they believe, and someone else taking adverse action against them is not going to get them to override those beliefs and change their behavior.
Well, we are so doggone lucky in North Carolina. I don't think the average Mason knows how lucky we are to have the leadership that we have. And personally, I think that the reason that we not only have good leadership, but that we don't have these problems that you see everywhere is because we're not looking to the left and to the right and behind us to see what's going on. You know, we're driving forward and being proactive and creating things. And when you're busy creating stuff, you don't really have time to worry about what's going on around you.
Past Grandmaster Leonard Seyfried, I heard him say one time that in his neighborhood, when they were building the clubhouse, they didn't have a membership problem or an attendance problem. And there's a lot of truth in that if you think about that. You know, when we focus on doing what we do as Masons, improving our lodges, improving the lodge experience, working on our buildings, doing the things that we do to build our communities, we don't have a membership problem or an attendance problem.
I need a mover. Okay.
So we're blessed in that regard. And I've said to a lot of people, this year has been the warm-up act. And the leadership that is lined up in the Grand Lodge line is going to blow everybody away. We just are so blessed with good leadership, and we have such a good mentoring program. You come into the Grand Lodge line as a junior Grand Steward, and you get 9 years, 8 years of mentoring before you become the Grand Master. You continue to get mentored after you're Grand Master or while you're Grand Master by past Grand Masters, by other folks who care about you and look after you and take care of you and whisper you wise counsel and make sure that you have what you need to be successful as Grand Master. And so all along that way, you're learning all about the organization. You sit on committees, you sit on boards, you have to take on additional responsibilities as you move through that 9-year system so that by the time you get to be Grand Master, you have had the opportunity to learn what you need to know to be a Grand Master. Now, we still jokingly say that when you finish your term as Grand Master, you're probably now qualified to be a Grand Steward because there's so much to it.
Yeah. So, say just a few words about Jimmy Hicks and tell us, just follow that right on into talking about Bobby Rideout. I know that Don was Right Worshipful Brother Cobb's pick, but I understand y'all said at annual communication that y'all made that pick together.
Sure.
So if you would just talk about him, and you keep talking, and I'm gonna go. I got to do something on the stove.
No problem. So Jimmy Hicks is just a very talented, wonderful Mason and lawyer who we have thoroughly enjoyed having in the Grand Lodge line for a long time. He was the judge advocate for a number of years before he was named as junior steward and has progressed through the line all the way to the point of being senior grand warden. Jimmy has had an opportunity to study international business and finance and wants to pursue that, and did not feel that with studying international business and finance he could give enough time to be in Deputy Grand Master and give enough time to be in Grand Master, and so he made the decision this summer to pursue his studies, pursue the opportunities that would come with that, and did not want to leave us in the lurch. So he let us know at a conference this summer that he was going to bow out of the line. We were absolutely heartbroken by that and are still heartbroken by that, because if you've ever watched the Grand Lodge line interact with each other, we all like each other, and we're all friends, and we all think the world of each other, and we're very much aligned. And so it was a real hurtful thing for us all to lose him. You know, we were very sad by that. But we also knew that our job was to make sure that his decision to pursue his studies and to do what's right for him, which we support completely, did not cause the Grand Lodge a gap in leadership. And so at the time we found out, Right Worshipful Brother Gene Cobb, Deputy Grand Master, had already identified the person he was going to name as Junior Steward. So that thankfully was already done. That person had already agreed. That happens to be Worshipful Brother Don Kaler. And so we knew that what we would hope to do is give the craft the opportunity, if they chose to advance everybody in the line so that Speed Hallman would move up to Deputy Grand Master. Everybody would take one step up. We'd fill in 2 spots at the base of the line to allow that mentoring to happen. Doesn't necessarily have to happen that way, but we thought that was the best way for it to happen. So to exercise leadership, we immediately went out and started looking for how do we fill that gap? How do we fill that leadership void, fill that expertise void? Because we really put a lot of thought into who goes in the Grand Line. We don't just pick somebody we like. We try to pick somebody who really brings something to the table. I describe it as intellectual horsepower. We want to bring intellectual horsepower to the table. My goal was always, I want to hire somebody better than me so that the line continually improves in its ability to serve the Grand Lodge. That's what we want to do. So we went looking. Technically, the Grand Master who's sitting fills any vacancy. But it makes no sense to exercise that in a vacuum because at those junior officer levels, the Grand Master has to appoint them every year. So it made total sense for us to do that by consensus. So Gene Cobb, Bryant Webster, Speed Hallman set out about trying to identify those candidates that we could all agree on. And we did a pretty robust search. We went through all the committee lists of the Grand Lodge. We identified people who were on boards and committees and commissions and masons we knew, trying to find just the right person. We were trying to take geography into account to try and get someone as far east as we could, since Jimmy is from the eastern part of the state. We really were looking for a lawyer because we have found over the last several years that having 3 lawyers in the Grand Lodge line was a really helpful thing because you just get different perspectives. So I always joke and say, you ask 3 lawyers, you'll get 5 opinions. So that was helpful to us. And so we wanted to perpetuate that. And so, because we're losing 2 lawyers out of the line, myself and Jimmy. So in that process, Robert Rideout kind of popped up because he was chair of the appeals committee, has done a fantastic job there. And most people know there are people who are on committees because Grand Masters put them on committees at the behest of someone else in the Grand Line to give that person some experience and some exposure and some mentoring even before they go in the Grand Line, so we can kind of take a look and say, gee, that person's really sharp. They do good work. Or, gee, we gave them a great shot and it just didn't work out. And it happens both ways. I had someone early on that I thought would be my pick, and I had way down the line, I had them put on a committee, and they never even showed up to the first meeting. Well, at least we know now. So Robert Rideout will be a home run. We're just super excited about both Don and he joining the Grand Line. My only disappointment is I'm going out, and so I won't get to work with them as closely as the other guys in the line will. But Robert is an administrative law judge. He does Social Security, disability kind of hearings for the federal government. Just a super guy, military, active duty. Through the National Guard, and just super. He's part of the JAG Corps for the U.S. Army. I think he's nearing retirement. He's kind of planning his affairs so that he'll have more time to do his Grand Line duties as they become more extensive. So we're just super excited about him.
Me too. Love that guy.
He's a great guy.
Man.
We're blessed. There's not a soul in the Grand Line that is not just an absolute rock star for Masonry.
We'll finish up with on a pretty serious topic. Our country going through some rough times right now. The election is just over, and feelings are hurt, and nerves are afraid, and America really seems to be in a position now. I've heard a lot of people say recently that Facebook plays a lot into this. In that, on Facebook you like certain things. If you're a conservative or a liberal politically, or if you like churchy things, or if you like motorcycle things, then you get those things in your feeds. In the press these days, is becoming, it seems more and more they fall into a paradigm where they're not just reporting the news, but they have their own agenda. It seems like, at least most of them. I watch the BBC. They're pretty fair. But by the things that we watch and we get on social media and from the media, we seem to be getting drawn more and more into polarities. I mean, one way or another. And Masonry, the second degree especially, teaches us that this is something that we're supposed to overcome, both resist and learn to overcome. You know, it says in the Minister of State part in the 32nd degree that I did the other night that that you're to become the middle pillar. You're to find your way to balance. And so Masons are uniquely positioned, I think, through our training that we get in the lodge, and just from the fact that we're supposed to be the grown-ups in the room, so to speak. That we should be an agent of calming during a time of chaos. Expound on that a little while.
So,
and while you're at it, I want to talk about. I'm going to finish up. You may want to just do all these at the same time. I want to talk about your legacy.
So, brotherly love, relief, and truth are the tenets of a Mason's profession. Those seem like pretty good starting points for how you show our community how to come together. If you love somebody, you can't hate them. If you're helping them, you can't hurt them. If you speak the truth, it's hard for anybody to be justifiably upset with that. They may not like the truth, but they can't be justifiably upset with you for speaking the truth. So we've got to do a good job, and those are in the order they're in for a reason. Brotherly love comes first, relief comes second, truth comes last. If you just lay it on them first and they're hurting and you don't love them, it just doesn't go over very well. So we've got to do a better job of being out in our communities and loving on people. That's the one thing I have learned this year above all others, is that it is not my place to judge anybody. God's got that well in hand. He does not need my help. And so my job is to love everybody. And if they're doing something they ought not to do, there's somebody bigger than me that's got a handle on that. He doesn't need my help to identify or tattle on them to say that they're doing something they ought not to do. So if I spend all my time loving everybody, and I still have to struggle with this. I mean, it's not like that's a fait accompli with me. I mean, I'm a rule follower. So when I see somebody else break the rules, I go, "That guy's breaking the rules." I go, "Wait a minute. That's not my place. Somebody else has got that under control. My job is to love on them. Now, I can help them aid a reformation, but it's not my job to be the tattletale on everybody. My job is just to love everybody." I think our society's got to get a handle on that. I've said repeatedly that I think Masonry is in the best position of any institution in our society to show people how to love on each other and how to avoid the things that divide us. I mean, we have very strict prohibitions in Masonry against discussing politics and religion, and there's good reasons for that. And we used to, our parents taught us, in polite company, you don't discuss those things. Because our parents knew, whether they were Masons or not, that causes divisions. People have very strongly held beliefs about politics and religion. And so if you avoid discussing those things with your friends, with other people in society, you can avoid some trouble. But if you choose to discuss it, you can discuss it in the right way. We may disagree. Well, if we disagree, there's at least 4 possibilities. You may be right, and I may be wrong. Or I might be right, and you might be wrong. Or we both might be right, or we both might be wrong. There's at least those 4 possibilities. There may be other combinations, but I'm smart enough to figure those 4 out. There's probably more that I'm not smart enough to figure out. But even if you're wrong, there's no need for me to hate you for being wrong. And if you're right, there's no need to hate you for being right. It makes no sense for me to hate you for being right. So it's a matter of accepting that we don't all think alike. And it's okay to disagree. And sometimes, if we think we disagree, we ought to keep our mouths shut. It is okay to have an unexpressed idea. You don't have to say everything. People go, oh, whoa, 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 he's impinging on our free speech. No. The idea behind free speech is that the government can't tell you what to say or not say. As Masons, we're taught to be diligent, prudent, discreet, temperate. That means sometimes, even if you believe it, even if it's true, you still ought not to say it because it will upset your brother or somebody else, and you ought to just hush. I think that's important.
Me too. I cannot thank you enough. On behalf of the 40 or 42 or 38,000 Masons, however many there are in North Carolina,
There we go.
I would like to thank you from the bottom of our heart for the service that you have and leadership you've given us this year. I love you, and I
I've
appreciate
had fun.
you.
I really have had the best time doing it.
And you have become a hugger.
I have become a hugger. The Eastern
Linda,
Star has made me a hugger.
I saw Linda Hyatt go to hug you somewhere early in the year. And it was I could tell it was uncomfortable for you. And then I saw her hug you at annual communication, and it was completely dead. She has made you a hugger.
She's made me a hugger.
She's getting all the credit for it.
Yep, she's made me a hugger. And she got me an Eastern Star. So it's good stuff. Thank you. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you've done for us.
Good
And we
stuff.
look forward to seeing you. I understand that Miss Jan's going to get you for a year, but after that, we have lots of things we need help with. So
When we told them this today at the Whitestone board meeting, I'm not disappearing completely. I'll continue to show up at board meetings up there and see what mischief I can cause.
good.
It's good stuff. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you
for all
so
you guys do.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. We'll see you.